Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, after 5 years of marriage, Opie discovered his wife had been cheating with Peter, a man from her past. Their open relationship had started while they were long distance, but continued deceitfully. When he found evidence of the affair, he confronted them, leading to their separation and divorce. His wife's relationship with Peter failed, and he began dating Peter's ex-fiancée, finding comfort in their shared experiences. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I have been married for 5 years. She was the first woman I ever met who really captured my attention and made me want to get married. We had a lot in common, and we wanted all of the same things out of life. It felt like it was meant to be. We dated for 2 years prior to getting married, and while we were dating, we had a period of long distance. My wife and I both had very strong intimate drives. So it was difficult. We eventually decided that since we couldn't see each other in person, we would try to have an open relationship. It wasn't something I would have normally done, but we agreed that it would be the best thing for us. At the time, we had a long talk and set a lot of boundaries to ensure we were handling everything as ethically as possible. We agreed that we couldn't establish romantic connections with the other people we were with. We needed to be aware of every partner the other person had, and the people we slept with needed to be clean. We were both open and honest about the people that we were seeing. Most of the time we would use dating apps like Tinder to meet new people, and we both had each other's login information, so we could see what was going on if we needed to. Honestly, we trusted each other enough not to have to use that information. Everything seems to be going well. I moved back with her after about 9 months of being away, and I instantly proposed to her. Now that we were back together, we didn't need to have all of the extra partners, so we both ended everything with them all. After being back for a few months, my wife was invited to a party, and she asked me to come along with her. It was just a simple birthday party for a friend of hers. I didn't know the friend, so I met him for the first time at the party. Peter, we'll call him here, seemed nice enough, and he and I got along pretty well. I was told that they were friends from high school. Not long after the party, we decided to elope, because we didn't care to throw some big lavish wedding. All we wanted was to be together. A little bit before our second wedding anniversary, she approached me asking if it might be beneficial to open up the marriage again. I didn't know where it was coming from because I thought that we were happy and satisfied with everything in the relationship. I asked her about why she wanted to, and she confessed that there was somebody that she was attracted to. I told her that I only thought the open relationship was doable because of the distance. I wasn't comfortable with it now that we were living together and married. She accepted what I had to say and didn't bring it up to me again. Over the next couple of years, a lot of the strange behavior was being displayed by her. She would stay late at work a lot more often, and at least once a month, she had a girls' night, where she slept over at a friend's house and supposedly just drank wine and did face masks. I thought we were solid. I thought that we communicated everything with each other, and I didn't have anything to worry about. It never crossed my mind that she would lie to me for such a long time. I only realized something was wrong when I finally caught her in a lie. It was one of the weekends where she was supposedly going to a girlfriend's house to hang out, and I didn't think anything about it. At least not until I ran into her friend's husband at a bar. There was a football game on, and I'd figured I would go to my favorite sports bar and watch it on the television there. He had the same idea. I recognized him, so I approached him and struck up a conversation. I made a joke about how it must have been impossible for him to take the time to watch the game while there was the girls' night at his house. He didn't know what I was talking about. I clarified what I meant, and he informed me that his wife was at home with their kids. I knew then that everything my wife said about going was a lie. I just didn't know why she was lying. I paid my tab and left the bar to go home and try to get to the bottom of it. I don't know if I speak for everyone when I say this, but when you're in a relationship and your partner lies to you about where they are and what they're doing, it immediately raises red flags for cheating. I thought back to how she asked me about opening the marriage years prior and how she told me she was attracted to someone. It was a long time before that, but that didn't mean she still didn't have those feelings. My wife was a very attractive woman and people hit on her all the time. It was possible that somebody could approach her and she could feel the same way about them. I had no way of finding out where she was or who she was with. I knew that she was going to be gone for the rest of the night, so I took my time reading online about the signs of someone having an affair. There were a lot of things that matched her behavior. Eventually, I decided that I was going to take a look at her computer because it seemed like communicating through email was a very popular way for cheaters to hide what they were doing. I logged into her computer and went to the email account that I was familiar with. I didn't see anything there. However, in her history, I saw that there was a Yahoo email account that I wasn't familiar with. I opened the website and her information was already saved, so I could access it pretty easily. There were hundreds of messages exchanged between her and Peter. I didn't remember who he was right away. He played a very insignificant part in my life, and aside from going to that one party years before, my wife never mentioned him. I knew almost nothing about the guy, but from what I could gather from their emails, they had been seeing each other for a very long time. It started when I was away, and my wife and I were seeing each other long distance. Peter knew that she was in an open relationship, but they both had romantic feelings for each other. I looked through my text message exchanges with my wife, and I never saw a mention of Peter in them. She told me about other partners, but she never told me about him, and apparently she never ended things with him. She and Peter were telling each other that they loved each other all the time. They made plans to go on dates together, go on weekend vacations together, and dates out of town where nobody would recognize them. They put a lot of planning into their affair to make sure it was as discreet as possible. I was alarmed at how good my wife and I were. Wife was at hiding it. She was clearly a skilled liar, and that was the biggest red flag anybody could have. There were a few mentions in the emails of Peter's fiancée. He had originally been waiting for my wife to be with just him, but that never happened. There were conversations about how they needed to end what they were doing, but they just couldn't. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but they didn't care. Peter got engaged to another woman just months prior to me finding out about all of this. Their most recent email exchanges had information about the hotel room they were going to be staying in for the night. I looked it up online and saw that it was about 45 minutes away from where we lived. They were going the extra mile to hide from everyone. I knew that I needed to act. I didn't want my wife to just get away with everything she was doing. I felt like I was married to a stranger after discovering everything that I did. I did some digging online and I found that Peter's wife was a legal assistant at the law firm he worked at. I figured that it was a long shot, but I called the firm and I asked for her. It was very lucky, but she was there. She was apparently just about to walk out the door. I gave her my information and I told her to call me when she was not at work because I had something I needed to tell her about her fiancé. She was alarmed, but I think her curiosity got the better of her and she humored me. She gave me a call about half an hour later and I explained everything to her. I told her about the open relationship, how my wife met Peter then, and how they were in a hotel 45 minutes away sleeping together. She was very angry. She explained to me that he had been taking work trips on the weekends frequently, and she had been suspecting for a while that there was something else going on. She just never had any proof. I told her that I planned on going to catch them, but she could join me if she wanted to. I swung by her house to pick her up, and we made our way to the hotel. Along the drive, she told me a lot of information about what was happening with Peter that coincided with things that I was noticing with my wife. We got to the motel, and I saw my wife's car in the parking lot. It was an outdoor motel, and I figured her car was probably parked in front of the route she was in, just to be sure I had the right room before doing what I was about to. I ran over to her car and tried the car handle to set the alarm off. She came out of the room moments later with a robe tied around her waist and turned the alarm off, checking the car to make sure it was okay. I could see Peter on the inside of the room, covering himself to stand in the doorway. I almost had to hold his fiancée back when she saw him. When I knew we had the right room, we both stormed out and approached the door to confront them. I knocked on the door and my wife called from the other side and told me to go away. I knocked again, and eventually Peter opened the door with a stern look on his face. As soon as he saw his fiancée, it disappeared, pushed me out of the way, and slapped him across the face, telling him off. My wife saw the commotion and walked over to me to see what was going on. I told her that I couldn't believe that she was still seeing somebody from our open relationship face. She told me that she loved him, and she tried to talk to me about him, but I just shut it down. I could see that she was just trying to save face because she never once mentioned Peter to me specifically. She kept him hidden from me throughout the entire time they were together. I told her that it was over between us, and there was no salvaging what we had after what happened. Peter's fiancée also broke off their engagement right there. We told them that they deserved each other for what happened, and we both ended up leaving. I got home a couple of hours later, and I packed a bag to leave. My wife arrived shortly after that, clearly having followed us from the hotel, and we got into a huge argument. She blamed me for opening up the door for Peter. She told me that if we hadn't agreed to the open marriage to begin with, they would have never met. It was all my fault that she cheated on me. I felt bad about it already, but I didn't need her standing there telling me that it was my fault. I got the paperwork in motion to divorce my wife the very next day. I had plenty of proof of her infidelity, so she didn't stand a chance going against me. I thought that my wife was the love of my life, so when we got married, there was no prenuptial agreement or anything like that. We didn't own our home, but we had some other assets that I got the better part of during the divorce. Peter's fiancée dragged him on social media, and it seemed like he lost a majority of his friends after the fact. My wife tried to date Peter after everything. They moved in together, and they thought they were going to live happily ever after, but as it turned out, they couldn't stand each other. They both threw away their relationships for nothing. Funnily enough, and part of me knows that this might be a bad idea, but Peter's ex-fiancée and I had become good friends after everything. I thought she was a nice girl, and after a while, I started developing feelings for her. She felt them too, so now we're going to try dating to see how that feels. I was apprehensive about the idea of dating at first, but knowing that she went through something similar to me is actually somewhat comforting because I don't think she will behave in the same way. Today's second story. In this story, OP and his wife, childhood friends who married after dating, built a life together with their twins. Their relationship soured when he discovered his wife having an affair with Paul, her cousin by marriage. Despite initial doubts, he confirmed the affair, decided to divorce, and publicly exposed the betrayal. Now, let's get into the story. My wife and I knew each other our entire lives before we got married. It was a really sweet story of childhood friends who fell in love young and got married. When we started dating, we were each other's first kiss. She was the only woman that I had ever been with, and I thought the same with her. We were neighbors growing up, and we would often play together as children. I knew her family, and she knew mine. Everybody would always joke with us about how they knew we would be together forever. After we both graduated college, we got married and we started planning our future. We ended up buying a house for my uncle in our hometown so we could be close to our families. After a couple of years, we decided to start building a family together. We have 2 children, twins, and our life was perfect. Out of the blue, one evening while we were watching a television show, my wife asked me if I regretted never being with another woman. I immediately told her that I didn't. I'll admit that there have been other women I've been attracted to. Sleeping with them had never crossed my mind, though. I love my wife very much, and she was the only one for me. I asked her about why she brought that up, and she told me that she had just been thinking about it. She explained that she was worried that I would get bored with her. She brushed it off then, and we continued watching our show. When my wife was a teenager, her aunt married a new man. I remember it being a big deal at the time because her aunt went through a very bitter divorce and was staying at my wife's family home for quite some time. When she married the man, she ended up moving out. The man that she married had 2 children of his own around our age, so it felt like we had 2 new friends in the neighborhood. Both were boys, and they were always kind of rowdy. One of them, let's call him Paul, has always been a bit of a problem child. Paul would have wild parties, he would get in trouble, and he slept around quite a bit. Despite all of that, He was always very fun to be around. He was the life of the party. In his adult years, he's calmed down quite a bit. He had a good job, and he was on the straight and narrow. His only major issue was his inability to remain in relationships. They always seemed to fail before they got too serious, and Paul would get pretty beat up about it. Paul was dating a girl that he really liked, and she ended up breaking up with him. He was hurt, so he reached out to my wife and me to talk. My wife, being the sensitive and caring woman that she was, went over to his house to make him dinner and listen to him. I didn't go because I didn't want to overwhelm him. I never expected that anything would happen between them. She came home later that night, and when I asked her about what happened, she was very evasive with her answers. She didn't seem to want to tell me about what Paul said to her. I thought it was fishy at the time, but again, I never thought she was doing anything inappropriate with him. Looking back, a lot of how she was acting after that night seemed like she felt guilty. She was being very generous to me with a lot of things. She kept cooking my favorite meals, she surprised me with small gifts, and she complimented me all the time. She was normally nice, but it was a little over the top. It felt almost like a child who broke something they shouldn't have been playing with, trying to make up for it. About a week after the night she visited Paul, she went back. She told me she was going to bring him some food just to make sure he was getting something healthy to eat. I offered to come along so I could check in on him, but my wife told me that it would be better if it was just her. Just assumed that it had something to do with him being in an emotional state. I stayed back and put the kids to bed while she went to visit Paul. She came back a few hours later and told me that they had a long talk about everything. She didn't give me any details about what he said. She started to visit Paul by herself a lot more frequently over the next few weeks. As I said before, Paul dated a lot of women and broke up with a lot of women. I had never seen him so distraught over a breakup before. The more time my wife was spending with him, the less it was making sense. She came home one night and I asked her about what was really going on with Paul. I didn't think that she was sleeping with him, but I thought something else was happening. It was just also out of the ordinary. She stuck to her story about Paul being very emotional after the breakup. I offered to maybe go talk to him and give him some advice, but she told me that it probably wouldn't be much help. Regardless of what she said, I was worried about him. He was my family and my friend, and I wanted him to be okay. Over my lunch break at work the following day, I stopped by his house to check on him. At the time this was happening, my wife wasn't working. She was a stay-at-home mom, and the kids were in school. So she had all day to do whatever she wanted to do. Her car was in the driveway when I arrived. She didn't tell me she was going to visit Paul that afternoon, so I was a little surprised. I approached the door, ready to ring the bell and pop in to see what was going on. Before I even touched it, I could hear noises right on the other side of the door. It sounded like they were having intimate, and my wife was being pinned up against the door. I was frozen in place. That was absolutely the last thing I expected to see. I couldn't even believe it. I don't know why I did it, but I ended up calling my wife on the other side of the door. I heard her phone go off, and I heard them both freeze for a moment while she looked at it and rejected the call. I heard some muffled conversation as Paul asked her if she was okay. My wife told him that it was just a little weird that I was calling in the middle of the day, and that worried her. Paul made a joke about having something that could make her forget all about that. They started kissing again, and they walked off somewhere else in the house. I stood outside for a few minutes contemplating what I wanted to do. I just caught my wife having intimate with Paul. Paul was her cousin, not related by blood, but he was still very much a part of the family. It took me a few minutes before I put everything together. I knew right away that it was over between her and me. Our entire relationship, all of the years we knew each other, was going to be flushed down the toilet. I was going to divorce her, and I was going to get proof of what happened before doing so. I knew Paul had a spare key hidden under a rock by his house, so I grabbed it and let myself in. I could hear the noises coming from the bedroom, and I made my way there. The door was wide open, and I pulled my phone out to take a quick video of both of them. After about 30 seconds passed, I knocked on the door, and both of them turned around to look at me. They tried to cover themselves up and explain what was happening. The absolute funniest part of this was my wife chasing me out of the house, telling me she was only sleeping with him to help get his mind off the other woman. As if that made it okay, I was flabbergasted. I called off work for the rest of the day and sat in my car while I looked for a good divorce attorney online. I reached out to one and set up a meeting. While I waited for that, I went home and packed a bag to go stay at my parents' house while everything was figured out. I grabbed the kids from school and brought them along with me. My wife was blowing up my phone, but all I did was text her and let her know that I had the kids and they were safe, but I needed time away from her. The next time I saw her, I was serving her with papers. That just wasn't enough for me, though. She cheated on me with her own cousin, destroying our family. I wanted to get back at her for what she did. I thought about it quite a bit, and I realized that not many people would be understanding of their relationship. Again, he wasn't a blood relative, but he was still family. I crafted a heartfelt Facebook post explaining to everybody that after years of being together, my wife and I were divorcing. I explained what happened, sparing very little detail. I might add a ton of family members commended, saying that what she did was wrong, and they were telling me how sour they were for what I went through. Later that same day, my wife and Paul both reached out to me and asked me to take the post down because they were getting very hateful messages from family and friends alike. I told them that I didn't have to take it down, and I didn't plan on it. Both my wife and her cousin were pretty much barred from every family function that we had. They lost a ton of friends, and pretty much everybody in our family shamed them for what they did. We lived in a small community, and word travels fast. So when pretty much everybody in town heard that Paul slept with his cousin, it was a little more difficult for him to find new girlfriends. Both of them were humiliated by the post. My wife and I are divorced now, and I was awarded the house and all of our assets because I purchased them all. She has received no spousal support from me, and until she gets a job, I have primary custody of the kids.